This is a Bernard Wilson interview. Bernard Lyle Wilson, Lyle, date of birth, December 4, 1924. He was born in Manton, Wexford County, Michigan. He served in World War II in the Army Air Corps. His highest rank was Staff Sergeant. His job was a B-26 tail gunner. The date of this interview is June 28, 2008 in Traverse City, Michigan. The interviewer is Charles Anspauch, A-N-S-P-A-U-G-H, U.S. Air Force retired. Bernard Wilson is my uncle. The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project. The parents' occupation, his father was a rural mail carrier in a rural area around Manton, Michigan. He had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. 2 of his other brothers were in World War II in the military. He had a brother, Chris, who was at Fort Shafter at the end of the war, Fort Shafter, Hawaii. And he had a brother, Britton Wilson, who was an MP and a military policeman up in Alaska.
Let's go.
You were a junior in high school in 1941.
Yes.
Did you follow the events in the world at that time in your life?
Well,
were you aware that a war was about to begin?
I was aware that the war was going to begin on December 7th. When they made the raid on Hawaii, wasn't it? Philippines. No, Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah. I was aware it was going to begin, yes.
Class of 1944, high school class of 1944. Most of those people wound up as being replacements in the infantry in Europe. How did you happen to get into the Air Corps rather than the infantry?
Well, what had happened is when I went into Fort Custer, I had to be drafted. I was turned 18 in December of 42, and in March, they called me up to come into the service, March of 43. And I went to the draft board in Cadillac, Michigan, and they gave me a 3 months extension, so I was deferred for 3 months. But what might be also connected to that is I had a close friend that went to school with in Manton by the name of Raymond Nelson, and he wanted to go in when I did because we had the idea that if we went in together, a good thing that we both want to be in the Air Force, that we both could stay together all through the war. Well, that was a misnomer because it wasn't true at all. They separated us. I wanted to fly, and he did too, but his eyesight wasn't good enough for him to fly. So he didn't get his choice to be in the Air Force. I did, and within a few days, took us to Fort Custer. We were together for a couple of days. They sent him on to radio school in Texas. They kept me there for a couple of weeks, and then they sent me to aerial gunnery school. Not aerial gunnery school. The first where you train. Now my mind isn't so good as it used to be.
You went to armament school.
Well, no, but I'm talking about my basic training. They sent me down to Mississippi, Gulfport, Mississippi, where I had basic training. Then immediately after that, after basic training, they sent me to Colorado. I went to Buckley Field, Colorado for armament school. And then at Buckley, Colorado, after I completed that, they sent us to get our crew members together. And that's where I met the rest of my crew members, was after armament school.
Okay. What was training like out at Lowry? Did you have a lot of shooting, a lot of shotgun shooting, or how did they train you to be a gunner?
Well, that was part of it. You started on a moving base with a moving target in a circle around kind of like a track. Maybe it's a mile. And the wheel of the pickup truck, where you were in a hoop in the back of it, would release a clay pigeon. And you did that for several days so you could get onto a moving target from a moving base. And so that was part of my training, the first part of it. Then from there you went airborne, and we had different color on the tips of our bullets. So they carried it with a long sleeve, and you would shoot at that sleeve, and you could tell if you had a red who hit the target and who didn't. And we did quite a lot of that. And getting back to the shotgun, it was a 12-gauge shotgun, and you'd shoot so many rounds that your arm would be black and blue and sore from that 12-gauge kicking you every time you shot one of the pigeons.
Okay. Now, the Air Force had a rule in that you couldn't be a crew member if you were taller than 6 feet tall. Tell us the story about how you got to be a crew member.
Oh, that's interesting. When I was being examined, it was in the long hall, and you go into a room and they take your blood pressure, then you go out and they check your teeth in another one in the dental chair there. And then one, they take you in and weigh in and measure your height. And I knew that you had to be 6 feet or less to fly. And that was put in lead pencil. And when I was out in the hall, I just took an eraser and erased it 2 inches. So I was 6'2" at the time. Of course, now I have, I doubt whether I'm 6 feet now probably, but that's about it. I lost height. I guess that happens with age. But that's how that happened. I erased it myself. It was put on there in lead pencil. And the only thing that was ever said about it was when I was getting to the end of the examination, I said, geez, you look awful tall for 6 feet. And that was the only comment that was made.
Okay. How long was training out at Lowry Field?
Well, I'm not certain, but I think it was about 6 months. In Lowry Field, we had to know the 50 caliber machine gun inside and out, and your final exam was they blindfold you, and you had to take the 50 caliber machine gun apart, blindfolded, and put it back together again. So you had to know the 50 caliber machine gun quite well to perform that exercise. And it was difficult, but if you didn't pass it the first time, you'd take the test again. I don't know if I passed it the first time or not, but it didn't take too long, and you had it down where you could disassemble the 50 caliber machine gun.
Where was your crew formed? What base were you at that time?
I really don't know the dates that our crew formed, but I hadn't met any of the officers, the pilot or co-pilot or bombardier, but excuse me, the other members, the non-commissioned officers, all had last names, not all of them, but most of them start with a W, because we came out in groups. Wilson is W, and Weems and Williams, I remember them. And then the radio man and engineer were close to the end of the alphabet. Their last names started with S. There was Straub and John Straub, and the other one was, my mind isn't good, but I shouldn't forget their names. Stump, Ray Stump and John Straub. They started with S. One was a radio man, the other was an engineer.
Now, I think your crew was formed at McDill Field, Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Dill Field. And they put us together, and I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but right after we were formed, we got our first furlough. And we knew it after we got back that we would be going overseas. And so we trained. I'll never forget the first night mission that I ever made, night flight that I ever made. It was difficult because I never made a night flight before. And as we took off, I could see flame coming out of the exhaust pipe. I didn't know it at the time, but so I called up on the intercom to the pilot. I said, "Something wrong back here, that flame's coming up." And he said, "Well," he said, "it's supposed to do that." And it wasn't much longer after that. I was in my position, and I used to ride on my knees backwards in my position in the tail section. There was a liquid that came in from the waist window. That was just about 20 minutes after that. And we were flying from Louisiana to St. Louis, Missouri, and we're going to stay overnight and come back the next day. And so I told the pilot, "There's a liquid coming in here, and I wouldn't be surprised it's gasoline." He says, "Well, Bernie, why don't you get some on your finger and smell it?" And so I did. And I went back to the pilot. I said, "Well, it smells like gasoline." He says, "Well, I think you ought to know that the bombardiers up here using the relief tube, and I think this airstream is catching it and bringing it in the waist window." Well, we all had nicknames, and so after that, they called me Sniffer. So I went through the rest of the service time as a member of the crew. My nickname was Sniffer.
Did you like your pilot and your co-pilot?
Well, they had different quarters than what we did, but they were real nice people. The co-pilot, the three non-commissioned officers, that include myself, really liked him. That was Sinnett, Jefferson Davis Sinnett. Excuse me. And incidentally, he stayed in the service and made a career of it, the last I knew. And I asked him, did we like them? Yeah, they seemed to be all right. The only thing I had against the pilot, he was very nervous. And we were all only about 20, 21 years of age. I don't know if that had any bearing on it or not, but before we take off, and he would be sweating. I wasn't up in his position to see it, but Sinnett would tell us this. He said, "Boy, he gets awful nervous and he sweats." But everything came out all right, as far as I'm concerned. He got us through, and it seemed like a good pilot.
How about your other gunner mates? Everybody get along?
Yeah, we all did. We all got along. When we weren't flying, of course, we were together, and we'd know a day ahead of time whether they were going to fly or not. They'd post it on the bulletin board. And you have to think that I made 32 missions, and I was only over there a little over a year. So you didn't work too much, and you had a lot of time, spare time, to hang around and go to the nearby pubs in town and walk in distance. But we got along real fine. The only one that was married, the engineer was a married man, and from California, John Straub. John Straub was the married man.
Okay, the name of your airplane?
The Rock Hill Special. Well, we call it our plane, but that isn't quite true because others use it off and on. But it was assigned to us. It was our responsibility. And thank goodness we had a good ground crew, so when we came in for a mission, they'd always go over that plane to the fine-tooth comb. And they had a lot of work to do, the most holes we ever picked up. And I didn't verify the number, because I didn't count them myself. But it had 105 holes from flak. We call it flak. And if you see the flak explode, it's a shell that explodes. They're trying to hit you with it, and that's a lot of. But a lot of those would go through both portions of the wings, so that would be two. So they were holes. They had one of the ground crew members said we had 105, and they have to patch those up and weld them. And of course, I picked up a part of the shell that came in the rear one time, and it was so hot it burned a hole in my glove. So I learned there. I had that for a souvenir for a long time, and I don't know what happened to it, but I brought it back from France with me, and today I don't know what happened to it, but I wanted that for a souvenir.
So did the pilot name the plane all by himself, or did he?
No, well, the plane had already been named. It's one that we took over. In fact, I think that the plane had made quite a few missions before we took it over. But they were the mechanics, the ground crew had about, I don't know how many planes they were supervising, but they spent a lot of time. As soon as you came in from your mission, they were right there to check everything and start working on it right away for the next mission. But sometimes, because of the weather and so forth, you wouldn't fly again for a week. But anyway, answering your question, I don't remember the question now.
No, you answered it.
Did I?
So your crew chief, the guy responsible for, #1 man responsible for maintenance of your airplane, he did a good job.
Yeah, he did an
Do you
excellent
remember
job.
his name?
No, I don't remember his name. I went to a reunion of our squadron, or bomb group, and I saw him there and had quite a chat with him. It was in, I can't remember the date, I think it was 1993. It was in where they played all the country music in Nashville. It was held in Nashville, Tennessee. We're on our way to Florida, and Abe was with me, and I'm glad I went to that. But from personnel that I flew with, there was only one that was there, was Ray Stump, the radio man from Fort Wayne. He lives in Bradenton, Florida, and he came down, and we had a nice chat. And so that's the only crew member I've seen since I was discharged, was Ray Stump from Bradenton, Florida. We lived down at Fort Myers. I should be ashamed of myself that I haven't seen him more, but I haven't.
Okay. So your crew got together down at MacDill, and you got in a plane assigned to your crew. How did you get from MacDill to Europe? Did you go on a troop ship? Did you fly?
Well, what had happened is the pilot and co-pilot would fly, and all the other personnel, the other four, in our group anyway, went over on the Queen Mary. We went to, they took us from MacDill Field to New Jersey, Camp Kilbourne, New Jersey. And we were there a few days, and they put us on the Queen Mary, and we went over. Now this was after I had my furlough and went home after we were assigned our crew. We knew who our members were, and we all went on furlough for about a week or 10 days to visit our parents and friends back home. So it was after that. But answering your question, we went over on the Queen Mary, and we came back on John L. Erickson, I think was the name of it. And they weren't only Air Force personnel on the Queen Mary, it was loaded with all kinds of troops on the way over. And as we went out of the harbor in New York, we were all singing, "The Yanks are coming. We'll be back when it's over there." And that was kind of tear-jerking, but it was good.
That was a World War I song.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, when you got to England, did you go to a repo depot?
Yes.
Would you explain what a repo depot is?
Stone. It took us into Stone, England, and we waited there until they assigned us a plane to go into France. And the airfield was put in by the engineers a few days before we got there, and it was corrugated
CSP.
steel, and it didn't take them long to put those down, because we went to 2 other fields after that while I was in France, and they served the purpose. They were awful loud as you were going down the runway for takeoff, because it was the steel would rattle quite a bit. But that was the deal. We went on over to France and flew out of there, our first missions.
So did you ever tell me about your first mission?
Well, the first mission, of course, we were all I'm sure everybody was nervous. And we heard so much about the flak and the fighter planes and so forth, and we were expecting some, but we got very little flak. We didn't see a fighter plane, and we didn't see a fighter, a German fighter, until our 6th mission. That's the first time that we had, and we had pretty good escort. Quite frequently, the reason we didn't see them, as soon as they were spotted by our escort, they'd go after them and they'd go away. And so the first mission was next thing to a milk run. We saw a little bit of flak. And of course, I wasn't familiar with flak, just what they tell us about it. And it'd be a big black puff, and that was the shell exploding. And so that's the first round, the first mission had a little bit of that, but not much. But we ran into some when we got up around 10, 12 missions. We saw quite a lot of flak. And a typical mission, if you wanted information on that, we'd get up early in the morning. We know the day ahead of time if our crew was going to fly or not. And so we'd have a meeting before breakfast, and they would explain to us, show us on the map of Germany the target we were going to hit that day. And they would go over what intelligence gave them, the number of guns that they anticipated at that target. And they'd tell us whether it was we bombed a lot of bridges over the Rhine River, or it was a supply depot where they had oil and military weapons, and or maybe a small factory. But they were all pretty well camouflaged. And so then we would take off on the mission, and I could go into detail all that to get up there and get your whole squadron lined up. And you'd circle the field until everybody was airborne. Then we'd take off. And of course, the B-26 is a medium bomber, and a mission, a long mission would be 3 hours, but most of them are between 2 and 3 hours. And so compared to the 17s and 24s, we had it knocked, so we'd only be gone a couple hours and we'd be back. But when we got back, they had interrogation right away. They'd take us into what was a tent, but they had wooden floors and so forth, and they would ask us, interrogate us as to what we saw, and if we thought we hit the target or not. Of course, they had pictures of this, so they knew whether we hit it or not. And generally, they were quite accurate. You could tell. And we would drop, the medium bomber used to drop their bombs at about 9,000 or 10,000 feet. And so, on some occasions, if you had a 2,000-pound bomb, you'd carry 2 of those. And when that exploded, the concussion would lift your plane even at 10,000 feet. So they must have been pretty powerful, but it's not at all powerful compared to what we have today, I'm sure. But and they would ask you if you see anything unusual that they should report. Then everybody got a shot of liquor, and that was to our, you only got 1 shot. So our crew and some of the others did the same. They get with the others and they'd take turns. And one person, when it was their turn, they got 6 shots. You got a shot from everybody, because that made it a little more enjoyable. So that was part of the deal on interrogation. But interrogation, I'm sure, was important to them. They'd ask if we saw any fighters and if we could identify them and so forth.
Since you were the tail gunner, you could essentially watch the bombs come off your airplane and go down.
Yes.
Did you have more responsibility than other crew members to report on your bomb damage assessment?
No, I don't think so. I could see them, and I could see them go all the way down. And what would happen, they had the lead bombardier, the lead pilot, and you could look up, the pilot could, and the co-pilot, and our bombardier, and look into the bomb bay of the lead plane. And when they opened the bomb bay doors, he'd push a lever, and the bomb bay doors would come open. And if he wanted to, when he wanted to drop the bombs, he saw them drop, he'd push our lever and the bombs would come out of the bomb bay. But when you're coming to the bomb run, that was pretty hairy, because they'd close, the planes would close in and get almost over a wing, because you have a better pattern at the target. And if you get close, you get the planes close. And so that was one time that I remember our co-pilot, Sinet, would say that, gee, I sweat him out because he's really wringing wet and he's nervous, and he's getting that plane in there close to make a good pattern. But we never had any accident, but I could see from the tail, from my position, sometimes he was awful close. And all you need is have one of those wings hit on the other plane, and it's probably curtains for you. But one of the saddest things I saw, not bombs drop, but somebody came out with the idea that the infantry and the Air Force should interchange personnel for just a couple of days to let them know how the other members of the other armed services lived. So during the Battle of the Bulge, now this is towards the end of the war, they sent our squadron 2 from the infantry that had been up in the trenches. And our squadron sent 2 the flyboys up to be with them in the trenches, and they came back and made a mission with us. And what was sad, that whoever gave them instructions on how to fasten up their parachute, it was a chest pack, and they were heavy straps, and you'd buckle your parachute and fasteners around those straps. But whoever gave them instructions didn't tell them how to secure their harness real well. And one of the saddest things I saw, the plane got hit and it started down, and the plane comes out and the parachute opens and the fellow goes right on through. The parachute harness opened on him, and lo and behold, his buddy in another plane got hit, and that happened to the 2 of them. Both of them were killed. Needless to say, after that, they didn't exchange anymore between the infantry and I imagine that probably was a factor. It was a boo-boo whoever gave them instructions on how to fasten their parachute. Well, that was kind of a interesting thing to watch, and you knew good and well that was the end of it. They go down just like sticks.
Either it hit the target or not, and the gun camera film could tell you.
Oh yeah, they would tell, their cameras would tell whether we hit the target, I'm sure.
Did you have any emotions about all these explosions going on and bombs going off and villages getting hit? Did you ever think about that or not?
Well, not really, not much. I didn't have any, for some reason I didn't have any love for the Germans, but I got over that. I've been in Florida for 25 years and I ran a lot of nice German people.
What did you fear most, fighters or flak?
The flak, because we saw more of that than we did of fighters. I feared the flak more. I only shot, I think it was 6 missions the only time I fired my guns at all, and you'd get off a few rounds and you wouldn't see them again, they'd take off. But
okay, that story about picking up a piece of hot shrapnel. Can you fill out the story a little bit more about the jack coming out of your intercom jack?
yeah, where'd you hear about that? I must have told you that before, huh?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we went through quite a lot of flak, and any time we did, the pilot always have us check in from the rear to the front, and so I'm in the rear, I'd be the first one to check in to see that everybody's all right. And lo and behold, there's a box on to the left of my hair that they had the cord where it hooked up your intercom system. And so after this, he had us check in, and I didn't answer. And the radio man was up in the plane, up in the fuselage, you can see here, but up about here, and I'm back here. And he could see back, and the radio man has an opening on both sides of the plane for stick his .50 caliber machine gun out. and he could see that my cord came on down from the speaking jack, and so he knew that I was all right. But he wanted to get my attention and tell me to plug it back in, so he picked up a caliber 50 on the floor and threw it at me, and it hit me in the back. And about that same time, a big black puff, when I knew it was flak, exploded, and about, Jesus, I thought I'd been hit, and I was sure I could feel blood running down here, and I'd take off my glove and right down, and finally I looked back up, and the radio man is laughing, and I thought sure I'd been hit, but it wasn't. It was just my imagination. I didn't get hit at all, but from a knee, when that hit, it was about the time the explosion of the ballistic that they sent up at us. So that was about the closest I come to getting wounded in the service. I did pick up that hot piece of shrapnel when it exploded, and it burned a hole in my glove, but it didn't leave any scars on me.
How was your living quarters and your food
Well,
when you were overseas?
Well, it wasn't. We had a lot of powdered eggs, and we had a lot of SOS. And most service people know what that is. I like that myself. I still like it today. But the food wasn't too bad. And we came in it was the Christmas, I think, of '45. It was during the Battle of the Bulge that they had something special. Well, the special was we were going to have ice cream. And you had to go into the tent, and you took your mess kit with you, and they'd give you, and we were going to have turkey dinner. And we did have. They give us a turkey and the mashed potatoes and gravy and dressing. Then they give you your ice cream, and you'd wait and wait and wait after you got your ice cream so you could get your dishes washed. You'd eat your ice cream right in the line, getting up to wash your dishes. And the tallow and so it was pretty cold, would almost freeze in your mess kit. But I answer your question, the food wasn't all that great, but you got plenty of it, and it wasn't all that bad. Spam, you used to get a lot of that. And today, occasionally, I have my wife Avis buy it because I kind of like it once in a while.
The spam you get in the grocery store today is not exactly the same as the spam was in those rations.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think it is the same.
Was it better or worse?
It's better in the grocery stores today than it was what they gave us.
How about your living quarters?
Well, the living quarters, while we were in France, while we were in the replacement depot in England, we had barracks. But we got over to France, they stayed in the tent. I think the tent was 12 by 12. And we would take boards from bomb boxes and board up the side of them and put a wooden floor in. So we made them quite comfortable. Now remember, as I told you, that in a little over a year I made 32 or 33 missions. My mind's getting bad, I can't remember the exact number. But we had wooden floors, and in the middle of the stove, in the middle of the tent, we'd have a little pot stove. And we would start a wooden fire, and then at night we'd put coal. We would get bags of coal we could have, and we'd keep a fire all night, so it kept us pretty warm. And it wasn't too bad. And the best thing we all missed was showering. So you'd take a bath in your helmet. We had those hard helmets like they give every branch, every man in the service. And you heat water on that little wood stove, and we would wash ourselves up, at least once a week. Or if you didn't do it any more often than that, you get smelling pretty bad. But that was, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but the living quarters weren't too bad. We had electric light, a bulb right in the middle of the tent, and there'd be four of us to a tent, one on each side of the, so that was the quarters we had.
When you moved to a different air base, who was responsible for getting your living quarters moved?
Well, we never took our tent with us. Everybody had to pack their own barracks bag, and they would put all this in the plane, and the first day we get up there, the engineers had already put down another strip for us, and we'd unload and start all over again, refinish it. And if the tent hadn't been used before, and generally they hadn't been, we'd have to put in the sidewalls. The sidewalls are wood up to about 6 feet tall. They were almost, and they had wooden floors. So you could stay warm, and we played a lot of cards, and had a lot of time to play cards, but we made it as comfortable as we could.
Okay, the Germans surrender in early May 1945. Do you remember that day, and if so, what was
I
it?
remember it well. When they surrendered, it created quite a lot of confusion on the base because we all wanted to celebrate, and we did. And it so happened that our crew was one of 3 that was selected to fly up into Germany. This was a couple of days after the war was over, and to pick up wine. And we went up, and then we were going to have a big squadron party, which we did have. And we got brand new 5-gallon gas cans. We went up to the winery, and I don't know what town it was in Germany, and those are filled up, and we brought them back. We had our plane was full, in the back where you could put them, and the other 2 planes were too. And we got back to the base. The squadron party started, and I wasn't a wine drinker, but everybody wanted to celebrate. And I remember getting my canteen cup, and they would go up, and you'd fill up your canteen cup, and there were so many people getting into that wine. You go back at the end of the line and drink it while you're going up for another fill up. And I got sicker than a dog. And the first thing I know, the ground is going around like this. And I was never so sick in my life. I threw up for all that night and half the next day, and I couldn't even keep water down. And a couple of the other fellows are that way too. But I guess it's because I drank too much wine. That probably was it. And I wasn't used to drinking wine. But we had a good party. And then we went into Brussels, Belgium, so we weren't far from the Belgian line then. And they were celebrating. And that was the next day, or a couple of days after, they were still celebrating. And we got involved in that to some extent.
How did you spend the 5-month period between May 45 and your discharge in 45? When did you actually get back to the States?
Well, we got back, I'm not certain, the war was over in May, right?
Yes.
I think we got back to the States in October. Now, the Air Force, in my opinion, had a real unique, they didn't have it, the government set it up, but the Air Force benefited more than anybody else. They had a point system for discharge, accumulate points. And you'd get 1 point for every mission you made, so right off the bat I had 32 points, or 33 points. Then for every battle you were in, you got 5 points. So they had me credited for 3. Of course, the one I remember the most is the Battle of Bulge. So that gave me another 15 or 20 points. Then for the time you was in, you got so many points. So the fellows in the Air Force accumulated points fast. I had a brother-in-law named Chris who was in much longer than I was, and I got out way before he did because he didn't accumulate many points. And my brother Britton is the same thing. He didn't accumulate many points, but I got mine in a hurry. And I came home, and I was out of the service by October 17th or 18th. I don't know what the date was.
After the Germans surrendered, and before you started back from Germany, or from Europe, did you ever worry about getting sent to the Pacific?
Yes, that was a rumor all the way back on the boat, is that we're not going to be discharged right away. They're going to get you back and your crew back together and start training for the Pacific. But that never materialized. As soon as we got back, we were in New Jersey for camp. I don't know, it was Kilbourne, for just a couple of days, and they sent us to Camp McCoy, a group of us from Michigan and Illinois and so forth. And within a few days, I was discharged, and it happened real fast.
You got discharged in St. Louis. Did you take the train back up?
I got discharged in Wisconsin at Camp McCoy.
That's where you got
I think it
discharged?
says that on my discharge papers too.
Now, how did you get home? Did you take the train?
Yes, I took the train from Camp McCoy into Chicago, and from Chicago up into Michigan. I caught another train to Grand Rapids, but from Grand Rapids to Traverse City, Michigan, there wasn't, they didn't have a, so I went and hitchhiked. And it was, at that time, if anybody saw a serviceman, they would hardly ever go by them, they'd pick them up if they were hitchhiking. So I got to Traverse City real rapid. There's one story that's, his name was, I told you that I had another friend that was a tail gunner also. His name was Weems, Harold Weems. And he and I were we were in the same tent. And at mail call, when they called your name, you gather at where the post office was or whatever, and you get your mail. So you usually, if you had a girlfriend, which I at that time didn't have one that I was corresponding with, but Weems had a girlfriend, and he was just out of high school like I was, and he was telling me, he said, now, I am going to go home, and I'm going to get married. And he says, when I come back, you'll probably see that I'm married. You'll notice that I'm married. So he was down in Illinois, so I left him in Chicago. And I told him I'd meet him at the train station in Chicago, and from there we went to training. I think you told me where it was we were training with the rest of the crew. And so the first thing I asked him, I said, well, I suppose you're married. Oh no. I said, we talked to our folks, we decided on the condition I'm just going overseas. A good idea to wait. And I said, yeah, that was a good idea. Now, how that ties in with the mail here, he'd line up his letters, and he used to get a lot of them by the postmark on them, so he wouldn't get anything old. And he's over there sitting on his bunk, and all of a sudden I see he's crying. And I go over and say, what's the matter? He said, read this letter. Well, his brother came home and married his girlfriend. And now that was what I thought was a pretty sad story. I saw him once after that. Of course, he came overseas, and his crew made it through too. They didn't lose anybody. And so I saw him after that, and he waited after the war was over because he fell in love with a girl in the village. And I'd go out with him and have a few beers. And hell, he couldn't speak French, and she couldn't speak English. It was kind of comical. I'd go with them, and they couldn't carry on a conversation with one another because she couldn't speak English, and he couldn't speak French. But I'll be damned, he did wait and married her. And when I was living in Traverse City, had finished college, was teaching here, and the car pulls up in front of our place. He had our address because I used to exchange cards with him. And I couldn't, when I found out who it was, I couldn't wait to ask him. I said, how their marriage is going. He said, oh, well, he says, it's pretty good. He says, I said, how are you getting along with your brother? Oh, we made up. And so I guess he didn't go out and shoot his brother, I think, but he was really madly in love with his high school sweetheart, and that never materialized.
So you hitchhiked from Traverse City to Manton.
Right.
Now, did the guy giving you the ride actually take you to your home, or did you?
Oh, I think, no, he didn't take me home. I think he just let me out downtown Manton. Of course, when you're downtown Manton, if you've been there, you know you have, Chuck. But you've been in Manton is a small town. It doesn't take long to get from one end of town to the other. And I'll never forget, my sisters were there because Mother knew I was coming home. And she had a nice dinner. And one of my favorite dishes that she had was tapioca pudding. And she had tapioca pudding. And when I was eating the tapioca pudding, I dropped the dish. And of course, Mother right away said, "Oh, you're not right." And that wasn't so at all. But I was about like I am now. I'm more steady now, I think, than I was when I first got out of the service. But that was an experience. Answering your question, I think I walked, there's only a few blocks from the blinker light down to my home.
So what was your reception when you knocked on the door?
Well, it was great. My sister Artie and I don't know if your mother Catherine was there or not, but Margie was there. My dad wasn't home. I think he was out on the mail route yet. But we had a nice chicken dinner and my tapioca pudding.
How was the reception by the community, the people in Manton?
Well, they were, I thought, were great. The soldier was king, you know, and won the war, and you come back with all the glory of winning. And I thought that the people treated us pretty great, a heck of a lot better than they did during the Korean War. And I don't know, I guess they're getting pretty good treatment now from what I gather.
Okay, did you have any lessons learned from military service?
Well, I can't recall any right offhand lessons learned. I always felt that if you had a job to do, you better get it done and do it. And they had a code, I guess, that people followed pretty much. Everybody in the service did it. If you did anything wrong, you got punished for it. I don't think I ever did anything wrong. I guess I was a perfect individual. I don't know.
Except for what might have happened or might not have happened in the realm of religion, World War II was the largest event in history, written history. How did wartime experiences affect your life?
Well, it did one thing for me. It taught me to recite the Lord's Prayer. I recite that every time we went down the runway to take off. And our family wasn't real that much sold on religion. We went to church when the neighbor lady got after us to go to Sunday school. They're having a contest to see who can bring in the most people, but my mother and dad didn't go very often. My dad, I think, would like to have been Catholic. His mother was Catholic, but answering your question, it opened my eyes about religion, and it wasn't uncommon for me to say a prayer after we got back and on the ground, knowing that I was all right, and everybody in the plane was all right, and we had a safe trip. But the thing that about the B-26 was what I really liked, that the missions weren't all that long. But we were closer to the front line all the time than the 17s and 24s were flying out of England and wherever. They'd be in the mission sometimes 8, 9 hours. And boy, that would be horrible, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. When did you finally start college?
Well, I got out in October, and getting back to this Ray Nelson, who and I were good friends, he got discharged in January. I got out in October, and he got discharged, and we already talked about it when we were going to go to college, and I always wanted to be a teacher and a coach because I had a coach in Manton by the name of John Damuth, who I had a lot of respect for. And so I knew that when I found out that GI Bill would pay for most all of my education, I enrolled right away. And I couldn't start until at Central Michigan College until January, and this is October, and that's about the time Ivan got out of the service, and he agreed he'd like to go there. And so we went down there, and enrolled. And what was kind of funny about that, the total enrollment at Central Michigan College, and this is now 1940, what? I graduated from Central in 49.
January 46.
Yeah, so must have been 46, I guess. There's a total enrollment with 680 girls and 200 boys. Now this is the year before, we were the first group of veterans that enrolled at Central. And we came in with 200 more veterans. And my gosh, at Dayton down there was just like a smorgasbord. They had all kinds of girls, big ones, fat ones, skinny ones. And so that part, and I wasn't a great lover or chaser of girls, but boy, there were a lot of girls and they were glad to see us. So to answer your question, there was under 1,000 students. And today, I'm familiar with this because the grandson just graduated from there, Lyle's oldest child, is 18,000. And it changed from a college to a university years ago. It's Central Michigan University now. And so that's a big change, but all schools and colleges have increased considerably.
Thank you for the interview. This is the cap insignia on an Air Force, an Army Air Force enlisted man. The lapel insignia are right here. This indicates United States, U.S. for United States, and he's got an aviator insignia on his left lapel. This is what was affectionately called a ruptured duck. If you were honorably discharged from World War II, you got a ruptured duck. That particular version of a ruptured duck can be worn as a lapel on a civilian suit. This is an expert marksman award for pistol. This is air crewman wings for a gunner, and you can see in this picture of Bernard Wilson, he's got his gunner wings on. This is a shoulder patch designating United States Army Air Corps. They'll wear on dress uniforms and on their khakis. This is a patch for ruptured duck or honorable discharge from World War II. Overseas bars, they were awarded 1 bar for each 6 months overseas. Dog tags. This is a 9th Air Force patch. The Air Force has got a number of numbered Air Forces. 9th Air Force in Europe was a tactical bomber force. Next is Distinguished Unit Citation. Everybody in the unit, in this case the 387th Bomb Group, was awarded that citation. It has no medal, it's only a ribbon. Next is the Air Medal. If you're an air crewman in combat, you are awarded air medals. He's got a silver oak leaf or a silver cluster on his air medal, which designates at least 30 combat missions. This is the Army Good Conduct Medal, awarded to all enlisted men who have at least 2 years of honorable service during World War II. This is the European Campaign Medal, and he's got 3 oak leaf clusters here, designating 3 battles that he participated in. World War II Victory Medal. Every veteran who was in World War II was awarded that medal.